Hi everyone, I'm Christina from That Canadian Teacher. If you couldn't tell already by my fancy headband, today I'm going to talk about how you can teach your students a little bit more about the origins of the red maple leaf Canadian flag in your Canadian history class. So stay tuned. When I'm teaching about the Canadian flag, I put it within the context of Canadian identity and that element that starts to establish itself in the post-Second World War era, where people are starting to really question what does it mean to be Canadian and what does Canadian identity even look like. So I start by asking the students to brainstorm what is Canadian identity. And a lot of times you get students saying things like Canadian identity is hockey. You want to encourage them to go beyond object or material things. So what does Canadian identity mean? What does an identity mean? So a shared language, a shared culture perhaps, a shared geographic landscape, so the students will brainstorm these kinds of ideas. And then I go into specifically the origin story of the Canadian flag. And over here, I'm going to put little bits from my slideshow that I present to my students. As you can see, it's pretty limited. This is just meant to act as an introduction to the concept of the red maple leaf and how we got to this point. So I start by going through pre-Confederation. What did the Canadian flag look like pre-Confederation? Then we move into this post-war era with Mackenzie King. Mackenzie King wanted to see a unique Canadian identity, and in fact saw that there was interest for a unique Canadian identity, but the result that came back was a flag that he did not like. So he reverted back to what is known as the Red Ensign and made that the official Canadian flag. By 1958, it was very clear that over 80% of Canadians wanted to see a new Canadian flag. 60% of those people wanted that flag to include a maple leaf. And so begins the attempt to create a new Canadian flag. Now, John Diefenbaker wanted nothing to do with a new Canadian flag, so it was shelved for a little bit. Once Lester Pearson becomes Prime Minister, the quest for a Canadian flag becomes a reality. Now, there was a lot of division about what that Canadian flag should look like. You had people who wanted to see a lot of our British or French history represented on that flag. Some people wanted to see the flora, the fauna of Canada represented on that flag. Other people questioned the colors that we should be using on the flag. And so it created a huge issue to figure out what should that Canadian flag look like. So this is what begins our activity for the students to participate in. First, we begin by identifying an intended consequence and then an unintended consequence, because that's going to be the crux, the backbone of this activity. So once we've established a definition of an intended and an unintended consequence, then I'm going to give them a collection of excerpts, and these are excerpts that I've kind of curated from the internet and a particular article from the Toronto Star, which I'll try to locate and link down below. And so what I've done is I put quotes about the experiences of Canadians at this point in time, and sometimes they come with little images. So for example, you have here an excerpt from A.Y. Jackson, who was a member of the Group of Seven, talking about his contribution to the Canada flag contest and to try and locate a Canada flag. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous. So for example, this one here talks about how someone was challenged to a duel over what the Canadian flag should look like. So the students as a group will parse through these excerpts and will attempt to complete a chart where they identify, is this an intended consequence or an unintended consequence? So for example, having two parliamentarians try to engage in a duel, that would be an unintended consequence. You wouldn't expect that to happen. But an intended consequence might be having Canadians think that your prime minister is a traitor for trying to ruin the Canadian flag. So students are going to try to discern what they feel are intended and unintended consequences from the excerpts that you're going to provide them with. Once they've completed their assessments, they're going to make a conclusion as to whether they feel that the intended consequences overwhelmed the unintended consequences or vice versa. So I hope that provided you with a good idea on how to get your students engaged in analyzing primary source evidence to try and establish the reasons and intended and unintended consequences to the establishment of the red maple leaf Canadian flag. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you can be made aware of any future videos that pop up on this channel. If you want to follow me on my social media, I'll put the links at the top here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.